Hi, I'm Tony Noel at FaithfulFriends.com, a caring community to celebrate and remember our beloved pets. We're always looking for unique, meaningful, personalized products to honor and remember our pets. And I have always been a fan of Let Your Love Grow. And I'm just delighted and proud to introduce Bob Jenkins, the founder of Let Your Love Grow. And Bob, the name says it so well. Will you please tell us what is Let Your Love Grow?
I'll be happy to, Tony. Thank you for putting me on the podcast. It's exciting to talk to you and see you again. This is fun. And we're proud to say that we're a proud friend of Faithful Friends. But it's all about working together and educating the consumer. So let me tell you how we came in to creating Let Your Love Grow. My wife and I founded the company in 2009, and we had a little toy dachshund. She was 5 pounds, just a little tiny thing. And a coyote attacked her in our front yard. And she lived for about 18 months after the attack, and she actually died during surgery. And at the time, my background is funeral service, and I had access to any type of memorial product, and we didn't want to bury her. We wanted her cremated, but we didn't want an urn. So my wife and I both like to garden. So we thought, how can we create something with her cremated remains? Now, being a funeral director, I thought, I know exactly what cremated remains are. And instead of using our dog's ashes, I thought, I want to do some research. So I reached out to a local pet crematory, knowing nothing about the pet industry. And I called up this pet crematory and I said, hey, I'm curious, do you ever have ashes that people don't use, cremated remains? He said, I have tons of them. He goes, a lot of people don't want their pet back. And so we have all these cremated remains left. I said, so what do you do with them? He said, we take them to a landfill. And that just broke my heart. I thought, there's got to be a solution to this. So I said, well, can I buy some? I want to try something, but I need some to test. He goes, come down, I'll give you all you want. So he gave us 2 large tubs of cremated remains. And let's clarify what cremated remains are. We call them ashes because they do resemble the look of ash, but in fact, they're actually 100% bone. Cremation is the reduction of the body by fire, and it leaves the skeletal remains behind. And then the skeletal remains then are processed into small particles that resemble ash. So that's how they got the name ashes. But they're 100%, well, I'd say 99.9% bone. So Annette and I started planting with different ratios of compost and cremated remains, and everything kept dying. And so a friend in our church we were talking to, his son is an environmental engineer. And so we were asking him about it. So he got involved and helped us. Well, he introduced us to a architect or a landscape architect that owned a composting company. And we explained our story to him, what we were wanting to do. He helped us develop a really rich organic matter, but the plants kept dying. So he recommended we talk to a plant laboratory. So we did. We reached out to this laboratory, explained to her what we wanted to do. So she started testing and got the same results we did. So she said, let's stop. Let's test the organic medium that you've created. And then let's test cremated remains all by themselves so we know what's going together and what's not. So we tested our product, and our product came back 100%. And what that means is it can work with any type of soil, any type of plant, in any type of environment. So she said, you've created a great growing medium. However, cremated remains are toxic. And I said, so what do you mean by being toxic? She showed us the report. She goes, there's calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, all those elements are within cremated remains, but they're locked because of the pH. The pH of the cremated remains was between 11 and 12. And anything for that to be plant life available has to be below 6.5. So that's a big spread. She said the biggest concern of toxicity is the amount of sodium in the ash. Because it's concentrated, the sodium is what detrimental to plant life, especially the root growth. So I said, so what is our solution to this? She goes, well, you need to alter your product to bring down the pH so everything can be plant life available. She goes, and then the only solution for the sodium is dilution. You have to dilute it. So that's why we have exact ratios of product to cremated remains. So once we played around with that, we got brave enough to use our dog's ashes. And for the last 12 years, Silky would follow the sunshine through the house. Wherever the sun was shining, you'd find her laying on the floor in front of the window for the sunshine. So we found this petite, or it's called a white night tree, a beautiful little tree that we planted out front, and it stays in the sun all day long. And we see it every time we leave the house and every time we come home. We got a little dachshund statue there. And then we have 2 more dachshunds that have died, and they're bushes in our backyard. So that's how we created Let Your Love Grow. And once we did that, a couple of neighbors said, gosh, we'd like to do it. And we thought, you know what, we might have something here. And, you and I met by going through all these pet association meetings and networking. Well, now we sell our product in 5 countries and 3 continents. And so we're pretty proud of how we've grown.
That's quite a story, and you should be proud, because you're offering something that is so special. When you look at a tree or a bush and you say, oh, that's Fluffy's bush, it is literally, Fluffy is part of that bush. Am I right, Bob? The nutrients are actually taken up into the plant.
Yes, the laboratory did testing where they used our product in cremated remains, soil and cremated remains, and all the plants that they had in soil and cremated remains had no uptake of the elements within the bone. All the plants that were in our product, and our product is mixed with soil. Our product is not a soil by itself. It's a soil amendment. So in the testing that had our product, there was soil, our product, and cremated remains. And what they do is they burn the leaves of those plants, and then they test all the elements in that ash of the leaf. Mm-hmm. And they actually found elements from the bone taken up into those leaves. So it truly does become part of whatever living flora it comes into contact, whether it's grass, weeds, flowers, bush, trees, anything that has a root system that comes into contact with this is important. And one of the things that we really had to focus on, Tony, was the root. What we found is seeds don't work so well. We don't recommend starting a plant from seed with cremated remains because the sodium is so toxic. Mm. And what the sodium does is, as a seed starts to germinate and little root hairs come out and start growing, they will actually turn away from the sodium. But at the same time, the sodium is trying to fight for attaching to that root system, just like all the good elements within the soil. But because the sodium overpowers everything, when the cremated remains aren't mixed with our product, the plant will grow horizontal roots, not vertical, and it never becomes an established plant. So we've done a lot of testing in this, and we've tested other products out there that claim, you put the cremated remains in, you put this proprietary mix in, you plant a seed on top of it, everything grows. It doesn't work. And one of the things that we're really proud of is everything we've done is based on science. We have a team of forensic scientists. We started with a forensic entomologist who is a plant or a bug life doctor, and he studies how dead bodies affect the environment and bug life. When we were doing our research with him, he introduced us to a forensic taphonomist, who, the best way to describe a forensic taphonomist is a soil pathologist. And this guy has helped us create the balance we need to get the microbes we need to reflect decomposition. And then these 2 scientists introduced us to a forensic anthropologist, because one of the problems with even burying a body or even cremated a body and burying cremated remains untreated is they never change state because there's no bacteria or moisture. So what our product does is it jumpstarts Mother Nature that the cremation process stops. The cremation process removes all moisture and bacteria from the bone. So it's sterilized. It's very similar to a fossil. And what we do is the cremation ash has to be mixed with our product. It can't just be layered. It actually has to be mixed. And you can do this at home. and I'll explain all of our different sizes of packages. But by mixing it, all the little fragments of ash are exposed to this bacteria, and they break down naturally and continue the flow of life, whether it be in a flower pot. If someone, we do a lot of business in New York City, Chicago, LA, big cities where people live in condominiums or apartments, and they don't have access to a lawn, but maybe they had a bird or a kitty cat or a turtle or, some type of pet, and they want to create a memorial, but they don't have a big area to do it in. So we've designed our product and packaging where this can be made into a flower pot. We don't recommend any smaller than a 14-inch flower pot, but it can be any type of house plant, or it can be a landscape, or it can be a tree. So we try to make it as usable as possible, because everybody grieves differently.
Mhm.
And as you know, especially pet grief, for those of us that have worked in the pet industry, we understand pet grief is as real as human grief, sometimes more difficult. And I've been in the funeral business over 45 years and worked with thousands of families. And I've worked in a pet crematory for several years. And sometimes I can actually see the pet grief is more deep because of that bonded relationship, to where when a human dies, many times it may be expected, it may have been a long-term illness or something, sometimes it's a tragic thing like a young person or maybe a sudden death. But when that pet dies, we know we're going to outlive them, but still it breaks our heart when they leave our lives. And so we've tried to create something that can be as individual to the person, because grief is as individual as we are.
Well, that's so beautifully said. I always say our pets are only on loan to us and never for long enough. Yeah. So Bob, I'm hearing that I don't have to use all of my remains. I can take a portion of it, so that, let's say I do plant a tree to Fluffy. Well, actually, this was my girl I lost last
Oh, there you
year.
go.
Her name was
Yeah. Just last year?
last year, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But if I say I plant a tree with her in it,
Mhm.
but then I move,
Yeah.
I can still keep some of the cremated remains in an urn, and then take it with me and plant another tree or bush or plant in another place.
Right. So for example, we have 3 different sizes of pet
Okay.
pack. Okay, so this one is for pets 30 pounds and under, no matter what type of breed, any pet 30 pounds or under. So you can use all of the ashes or as little of the ashes as you want. The less ash you use, the more rich the mixture is. The more ash you use, obviously the sodium gets higher. And then we have a bag, pet size bag for pets 31 to 75 pounds.
Mm.
And then we have one for 76 to 125 pounds.
Oh, nice.
All the mixing directions are on back. Very simple. You don't have to be a master gardener. We try to keep it as simple as possible. The only thing we recommend is you follow the mixing directions or planting directions of whatever type of plant you buy. And we have a lot of customers that will call us up and like you, they don't want to use all the ashes because maybe they know they're going to be mobile or they're going to be moving at some point, but they want something. So obviously they can do a potted container, but we have a lot of families that have multiple pets.
Oh, you bet.
I mean, it's not uncommon. One lady called us up, she had 5 kitty cats and she wanted to do something with them. And we said, you can actually take a small portion of each kitty cat and let them become one plant. And
I
that
was
would,
just gonna ask you that, so they could all live together in the
Yep.
same plant?
Yep.
Isn't that lovely?
Let me tell you another interesting story.
Okay.
One Friday evening, I got this call, and this gentleman said, I've been on your website and have a question. He goes, my dad died 40 years ago, and we still have his ashes. My mom died a year ago, and we're all getting together this weekend at the family farm, and we want to plant mom and dad as one tree. Can we do that? I said, absolutely. He said, well, here's the catch. He goes, when mom and dad got married, they had a dog, and they cherished this dog before they had any children, and they've kept that dog's ashes all these years. we would like to put the dog with them. Is that possible? I said, absolutely. So mom and dad and their pet that they had before children are now a tree on their family farm.
Oh, you're bringing a tear to my eye. That's a very nice story. Powerful, powerful stuff.
Yeah, people don't realize, I think it's all about lack of education. When it comes to when people are faced with the death of a pet, even though we know it's coming by their sickness or whatever, we go to a veterinarian, and no shame on veterinarians, but they're into the health and well-being of a pet. And when that pet dies, whatever pet dies, they make their money by going to the next family and helping them. However, pet parents don't, and on the human side, we have a culture that we follow, whatever it may be, whatever your culture is. When we have a human death, we know there's going to be a cremation, the family gathers at the funeral home or the graveside. There's a culture, there's a process. We don't have that with pets because the pet started out as a backyard animal, protecting the farm. Then it became a backroom animal when it got cold. Next thing you know, it's in the kitchen having its own plate of dinner. Now it's in the living room. Now it's in our bed, and it's migrated into being such a vital part of pet parents' lives. But when death comes, pet parents don't know what to do with that. A veterinarian may say, you want me to take care of everything for, Fluffy. Sure. They have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
Some people do some research and say, hey, I want my cat, my dog, my bird, my dragon ashes back. I want to do something with them. But a lot of pet parents don't know that. And I've had many conversations with friends, and when we talk about what we do with Let Your Love Grow, they're like, oh, my dog died. And I'll say, did you get the ashes back? And they're like, no. And they said, what happens to those? And I said, well, sometimes they go to a landfill, but we make a bulk product for pet crematories that mixes massive amounts of cremated remains monthly outside of the communal remains. And it has to sit for about 2 or 3 months. And then these pet crematories can scatter that or bury that safely. Because if you bury cremated remains untreated, they're porous and the ground is moist and they literally become like a salt lick below the environment. So any future planting there will grow away from that. I've worked with pet crematories that have scattering grounds, and they've been scattering out there for 20, 30 years. I had this one customer, the wife loved what we did. She thought our products are great, and she got it. Her husband thought I was selling snake oil. He really did. And so I went over one day and to this account, and it's several hours away, and did a lunch and learn with them. And the husband was sitting there, and he was laying back like this, and you could just tell he thought I was selling snake oil. And the employees were getting involved in the conversation. The wife loved it. So the husband said, I want to ask you a question. He goes, we've been scattering out here in this field for 20 years. He said, you're telling me there's still ashes out there? I said, yeah. He said, I don't believe you. I said, I can prove it to you. Because I said, we have a program that we help with pet crematories where if they have a scattering garden, and we do human scattering gardens too, we can take a core sample of about 6 inches of that soil and send it into our laboratory we work with. They test that and help us create the proper ratio of ash to product so all the plant life, the grasses and everything flourish like we want them to. So he went out there with us, and my wife Annette and I were out there, and we were taking core samples. And in the first 4 inches of we took 9 samples, and in the first 4 inches, you could see bone.
Wow.
So all that spreading he had done, it had worked its way down in the soil, but it never went away. And this had been 20 years, that scattering. And he said, well, I've got patches, I can't even get grass to grow. And I said, it's because you have concentrated cremated remains there. So I said, we can put you on a program where you mix our product and we treat the ground by itself, but then all future scattering is mixed with our product. Next year, he calls me up. He said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I got a problem with what your product's doing. I said, what's that? He goes, I have to mow twice a week. He said, I've got more grass. I know what to do with it. So, it truly is. Cremation stops the natural flow of life. I mean, leaves on a tree are made to fall and break down and go into the ground. Flowers are made to grow and bloom and blossom and die, and then grow and bloom and blossom again. And same thing with us. We're made to be born and live a life, but then return to the earth, whether it be by burial or whether it be by cremation. But metal burial caskets and concrete vaults stop that, and cremation stops it on the other end. So we've created systems to help that natural flow of energy keep going, because we don't have any more earth we can annex. This is all we have. And the countries that we're growing in are countries that are truly running out of burial space. So we make a burial product for full body burial as much as we do for cremation. So we've kind of, spanned out quite a bit. We're pretty proud of where we're heading.
So can your product only be used with cremated remains, not any other form? Like you couldn't sprinkle it in a casket or something?
We have 3 products. Let Your Love Grow is our brand.
Right.
Our products, and we don't really have this on our packaging, but we're going to start it. RTN1 is for cremated remains. It's whether it's communal cremated remains in massive amounts or individual, maybe just a little sprinkle that somebody wants to create a flower pot. Then we have RTN2 that we make for full body burial in the earth, for natural burial, where people don't want to be embalmed. They want everything natural. The cemetery isn't mowed. It's all beautiful and very, very natural. And the original design of this product was, as an embalmer, when you put a body in the ground and it breaks down, the liquids that come out of the body is called adipocere. And sometimes that adipocere can contaminate surrounding areas. So for example, in the 1800s, when the great pandemic hit Europe, that's where the 6-foot grave came into play. They thought if we bury these bodies 6 foot in the ground, we'll get rid of the plague. Well, table water got up into the bottom of those graves, and it spread the pandemic even worse. So I wanted to find out what happens to a body when it's buried like that, human or pet, and the adipocere leaches into the soil below. So that's where we started studying with an entomologist 12 years ago. In 2011, we started this research. And what we found is our product, we buried, we used pig bodies. It was pigs that came from a pork farm that were either deformed or diseased. So we didn't kill healthy, happy pigs. They were all going to be euthanized anyway. And the reason we use pigs, Tony, is interesting. If we used human bodies, number one, we had to pay a lot of money for a human body to use for research. Number two, that human body had probably either been deeply refrigerated or frozen or maybe embalmed. So the physiology of the body was altered. So by getting pigs that were just euthanized, gave us a more real reading of what happens to a human that had just died and wants a natural burial with no embalming, no refrigeration or any of that. So we studied what happened below the bottom of the grave, but we also found out our product advanced the decomposition of the body. And as the bacteria that came out of the body and did its natural decomposition process, in normal cases, the bodies that were in soil, the bones were still there because the bacteria lost its food source once the flesh and the organs were gone. What we found when our product was above and below the body, as the bacteria came out of the body and it met our bacteria coming into the body, the two became very aggressive toward each other and were strong enough to eliminate the bone and everything else. So we actually have a product that, after 2 or 3 years of being fully buried in our product, that grave can be reused. And that's what they're doing in a lot of European countries. They resell the grave space after 20, 25 years, but they have to extract the bone that's there. And with our product, they don't. They can just open the grave and put another body in it.
That's brilliant. I told you, I've always been a fan of what you do. And I'm going to ask you a question. I hear a lot of people not a lot, but people who do bury their pets in their backyards, etc. Could you just speak to that and the maybe pluses and minuses of that? And I know yours is a superior way.
Yeah. Well, again, it's lack of education. A lot of people, you and I grew up in a generation that we weren't as metropolitan as we are today. And, everybody had a backyard. And a lot of times that was, well, even a backyard today is probably still the main competitor to pet crematories is the backyard. However, almost all municipalities have regulations that don't allow you to bury in the backyard for several reasons. Number one, carnivores, where we live out in St. Louis County, we're in a rural area, but we're still metropolitan. We have coyotes, we have everything running around out here, and dogs, other dogs. They can sniff out that body if you're not buried deep enough. And most families aren't going to go 4 or 5 foot deep. They're going to go maybe 18 inches and cover the ground. And secondly, if you move, what do? And operating a pet crematory, a lot of families would move and bring us the shoebox, the Tupperware that they buried 5-10 years ago, terribly nasty, stinky, messy, and want us to cremate that so they could take that pet with them. So burying in the backyard, unless you have a farm and heavy duty equipment to get 4 or 5 foot down, don't bury on your own. Now there are pet cemeteries that you can bury in. If burial is important to you, reach out in your community and find a pet cemetery where it's protected property, it's done properly, and you can memorialize your pet there. But I strongly, even in our product, I mean, we've had people buy our product to bury in the backyard, but we give them specific directions to dig deep because carnivores, their sense of smell is pretty powerful. And I know this sounds very crude, but a dead animal is a dead animal, whether it's a pet or not. And when it's in the backyard, it's open to hazard communities.
I couldn't agree more. And I know that municipalities and HOAs, many have laws about not burying an intact animal in your yard or your area.
And some of them have restrictions on burying cremated remains.
Yes, that's right, because they do have toxins, et cetera, in them.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we've worked with several HOAs that people have questioned, if I plant this one lady wanted her husband, she lived out in Arizona, and of course everything out there is rock. And she wanted to, her husband apparently had designed their landscape and she wanted to put his ashes in there. And we submitted a letter of what our product does. And they let her put her husband in there, knowing she wouldn't, dig up anything when she left or died, that would be his place of memorialization.
That's good. Bob, you are giving everyone listening a wonderful education about this, and I appreciate it. And I'd like to say to your point about helping educate, not just those of us who have pets and go to a vet, but also the vets. That's been part of the mission Faithful Friends has, is to help provide education. So I'm looking forward to having some of your educational material available in the library at faithfulfriends.com. And I'd like to ask you, you've covered so much. I had a list of questions, and I'm looking at them here, and I don't see anything that you haven't addressed. Is there anything we haven't talked on that is important to know?
I think the main thing is, as a pet parent, if you've never experienced the loss of a pet and you're a pet parent, you're going to understand what your community offers. Spend the time, do some research, understand it. Our website, www.letyourlovegrow.com, has a lot of information that's available. You offer some wonderful information. Just do some research of what's out there. And one thing that I do want to stress that makes us different than any other product out there. Number one, we are the original product. We were the first ones to do this. And again, all of our product is based on science. We can back up everything we're saying with science. when you're out there looking and people, whether it's a pet or human, some crematory or funeral home, they want to sell you a biodegradable urn. And it sounds green. There's a lot of greenwashing out there today. And we're trying to really create the criteria of what truly is green. A biodegradable urn will do what it says it does. It will break down, but it will leave a concentration of cremated remains, and that becomes literally a salt lick and will never go away. It will be there for generations. Matter of fact, I work with a cemetery out in Colorado, and I was talking to the property manager, and I was making my pitch, and when I said this, he kind of gave me a dumb look. He said, "Come with me for a minute." And we walked over, and they had 30 or 40 cremated remains they had dug up that had been buried for more than 40 years. And he said, "Our grounds are dying." And he goes, "We have to have help." And, our product was the answer. So the main thing is understand a biodegradable urn will only do what it says it does. Our product can be mixed and put into a biodegradable urn if it's very important that it be contained. A lot of people like to just put the mixture together and put it directly into the ground. That's very safe. But as far as scattering, you have to have permission to scatter if it's not your property. Anything beyond your property, you have to have permission to scatter. And our product can be used for scattering, but the caveat is the ashes have to be mixed with our product, and they have to sit for at least 90 to 120 days for the material of our product to break down the pH and the dilute the sodium. If it's scattered too soon, the product and the bone will separate when it rains or the sprinkler system goes off, and you lost all the efficacy of the product. So we don't recommend scattering for several reasons. Number one, there's not many places that allow it. And number two, it's just not healthy for the plant life. And it has to sit for so long.
Wow, that's an important point you just made. Can your product be used without remains, just as a plant nutrient?
It can. We have several gardeners. We have a real close friend of ours who is quite the gardener. He's a physician, and he grows all his own plants. And so he buys bulk of our product. I have several pallets. Well, last year he makes his own potting soil, and I was talking to him several years ago. He didn't know what we did. I was telling him what we did. He said, "Well, I'm going to try some and use that in my mixture that I make for my potting soil." And so he started making his own potting soil. And a couple of years ago, he had excellent plants. I mean, he starts everything from the seed. Now, this is no cremated remains at all. This is, yeah. And this past year, he said, "I didn't realize it, but I doubled your amount of product with my mixture." And he had plants, seedlings that were 3 and 4 foot tall. That he said, I have to put them out in the ground because they've outgrown the containers. So he's a big thing. My wife and I use it every year. We use it just for our flower gardens, because what our product does, Tony, is it's very rich in nitrogen and microbes that and the organic matter is very high. Organic matter, in potting soil you buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, the organic matter in that may be 5 or 7 best. Our organic matter will range anywhere from 35 to 50. And what that means is there's very rich nutrients in there that will pull the root system down real deep. So when you hit that dry, arid time of the summer, the plants will survive and thrive. So we cover our front lawn every fall with a sprinkling of our product. Our neighbor across the street a couple of years ago was a senior vice president for Monsanto, which is now Bayer. And of course, they have access to all these, products and that. He come over one day, he goes, "What in God's name do you do to your lawn?" He goes, "It is the most perfect lawn." And he started buying our product and doing it.
That's the best testament you can get right there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Bob,
we wanted to create something that was easy to use and had universal use, and it created that moment of therapeutic grief closure for families. That's really what it comes down to.
I think it's just beautiful. It's truly a way to stay literally in touch with your pet or person. But
Absolutely.
we're talking about pets, and I just think it's brilliant, and I applaud what you and Annette have done, and I appreciate what you have done for all of us with this. And I look forward to working more with you to help educate more people and spread the word about spreading Let Your Love Grow, to truly let your love continue to grow in the form of a plant.
Thank you. I look forward to, I hope we do many more podcasts.
Well, that'd be fun, wouldn't it?
We can always find something to talk about.
Yes, we can. Bob, I really appreciate your spending the time and giving us this education. And I will encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast to look into the educational components in the blog at Let Your Love Grow or in the library at faithfulfriends.com. So Bob Jenkins, I hope you continue always to let your love grow.
Thank you, Tony.
Mm.